Today is a triumph for freedom as huge as any victory that's ever been won on any battlefield. Yet to seize the meaning of this day, we must recall darker times. 3.5 centuries ago, the first Negroes arrived at Jamestown. They did not arrive in brave ships in search of a home for freedom. They did not mingle fear and joy in expectation that in this new world anything would be possible to a man strong enough to reach for it. They came in darkness and they came in chains. And today, we strike away the last major shackle of those fierce and ancient bonds.
Thanks, LBJ. Because of you, blacks are now voting for their own demise. Please remember to like, subscribe, share this channel. Okay, let's get into it. So, I want to talk about the power play behind the Voting Rights Act. Okay? And I'm not talking about the Voting Rights Act of 1965. That was for a good cause at that time. I'm talking about the modern weaponized version. The one that's used not to protect voters, but to redraw America's political map. You know, I was sitting down always saying to myself, it's 2010, 2015, 2020, 2025. Why are Democrats always screaming marginalization, oppression, suppressed, all this stuff all the time? And then black people go berserk, get in their feelings. And I'm saying to myself, why do Democrats continue doing that? And then, thank you, President Trump and his administration, because it came up, the Voting Rights Act. So with the Voting Rights Act, what happened is that it was felt that black people needed representation. So in certain areas, they would draw their political map and redraw the area where I guess in conservative stronghold, and that would get more liberals into that area. And because blacks vote Democrat all the time, because we love to suffer. We like to be at the bottom. So we continue voting Democrat. And mind you, Democrats don't care anything about you. All they care about is power. Okay, so because of that, now it changes the map. So now this area, which would probably vote conservative, is gonna go liberal, because it's by law that areas such as conservative areas need some type of black representation. And so that's where the problem lies. And that's where I noticed this is why I noticed Democrats are fighting tooth and nail for this to stay part of the law. And I agree with conservatives. It needs to be removed. We do not need it anymore. We should be getting representation regardless. So this is why Democrats, they stand behind, like you get ratchet Jasmine Crockett, who talks a bunch of nonsense, sound like she's from the street, and you'll see black people like Nancy Pelosi and say, yay, go ahead. And it's only because they want black people to stay dumb and stupid, so that while black people are dumb and stupid and gonna fall in population, to fourth by 2065, they will continue holding on to power because we're so stupid that we're not realizing that Democrats are just using us to get that, to redraw those lines. So this is why why you see Democrats fighting tooth and nail. I've never seen them fight tooth and nail like this before. It's because they need to redraw, because now they can say that blacks are marginalized and they need some type of representation in more predominantly black or Hispanic areas. And so they need to redraw the line so that there's some type of black rep. But what happened is they take, if it's this amount of blacks and this amount of whites, and you got this amount of whites here, the blacks are in the middle, what they're going to do is draw over half of that. So you keep all of this, but now the whites are just here. So what they're going to say is, well, it's here and here, but no, you're hitting two different counties, two different areas. It's a smart move, and why Democrats are fighting tooth and nail to make sure that the Voting Rights Act of 1965 remain. And I'm hoping that it does not, because we don't need it anymore. We don't. Black people can get IDs. They can vote as long as they are U.S. citizens. Nobody's holding them back from voting. Okay? They can vote. When you go get your driver's license, when you get your state ID, they ask you, would you like to register to vote? You just say yes. It's that simple. So when I hear people say, they're trying to prevent me from voting, that is a lie, a total lie. And that's Democrats telling you that only because they're trying to hold on to power. And to hold on to power, they have to use you.
The Supreme Court may be about to do what Congress never could: dismantle the last pillar of the Voting Rights Act, and in doing so allow the concept of equal representation under the law to be completely taken away from the American people. In Louisiana versus Supreme Court's conservative majority signaled that they may gut Section 2, the very heart of the Voting Rights Act that protects voters of color from discrimination. And if they do, the consequences for black and brown representation in Congress will be catastrophic. Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act is the guardrail of democracy. It's what stops states from drawing maps that pack black voters into one district or split us across so many that we can't ever build real political power for representation. This one provision is why the South has any black congressional representation at all. When the Voting Rights Act passed in 1965, there were just 6 black members of Congress, none of them coming from the Deep South. Today, there are 63. And that didn't happen by chance. It happened because Section 2 made discrimination and redistricting illegal. But if the courts overturn it, everything changes overnight. According to Black Voters Matter and Fair Action 5, Republicans in control of state legislature could draw at least 19 congressional districts in their favor. We could see entire delegations in Alabama, Mississippi, South Carolina, and Tennessee lose every single Democratic seat that they have. Up to 30% of the Congressional Black Caucus could vanish. What's most f***ed up about this is that the challengers in this case are arguing that using race to remedy racial discrimination in itself is discrimination. They're weaponizing the 14th and 15th Amendments, the very amendments written to protect the rights of formerly enslaved people, to erase those rights away entirely. But there's hope. Congress can still act by passing the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. It's been introduced before, and it can be introduced again. The only question is whether there's the political will to protect democracy before it's too late. So the question isn't just legal, it's moral. We watch the slow dismantling of multiracial democracy, or will we stand up and fight for a nation where every vote and every voter still matters? Because if we lose Section 2, we don't just lose representation. We lose the real promise of America, of equal voice, of equal representation in the American story.
The Supreme Court appears on the verge of further undercutting voting rights. It's a move that could have huge implications on the upcoming midterm elections for youth. The dispute stems from Louisiana, where a federal judge ordered lawmakers to draw a second majority black congressional district after ruling the original map, with just 1 out of 6 districts being held by Democrats, unlawfully diluted black voting power. Now, a group of white voters is challenging that decision, arguing it goes too far. It's a position the court's conservatives are very, very likely to support. in plain English, America's main law that bans racial gerrymandering, Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, could be gone. Listen to what Justice Brett Kavanaugh had to say during arguments for the case.
This court's cases in a variety of contexts have said that race-based remedies are permissible for a period of time, sometimes for a long period of time, decades in some cases, but that they should not be indefinite and should have an endpoint.
Now here's what Janae Nelson, representing the civil rights group that challenged the original map, said during oral arguments.
My opponents here would like to make this a partisan issue because they believe the case law will enable their case to prevail, but it does not. This is about race. Section 2 and the Voting Rights Act is laser focused on eliminating racial discrimination from our electoral process, regardless of party. And if we look at many of the Black Congress people who were elected, they came out of Section 2 opportunity districts. They don't have to be majority-minority districts. Many of them are crossover districts. And so if we remove Section 2, we also recognize that there will likely be a resurgence of discrimination because Section 2 plays a deterrent effect.
If that portion of the law is gutted, it would have lasting effects on the country. Voting rights advocates warn that if the court weakens Section 2, states could redraw or even erase as many as 19 majority Black districts across the country, dramatically reducing Black political representation. A decision isn't expected until next summer, but depending on how the court rules, Louisiana could either keep its 2 majority Black districts or lose one entirely. And Republican state legislatures are watching, with North Carolina and Indiana already considering new congressional maps at President Trump's request.
North Carolina Republicans are moving forward with this plan to effectively oust one of the state's 3 Black members of Congress by carving up an area of eastern North Carolina in this congressional map. And this district happens to have a large Black population. So how does that square with what constitutes racial dilution under Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act?
Well, it's pretty squarely a violation of the act as far as I can tell. It is using Black voters as a means for gaining political power or partisan control. And while the Supreme Court did say in another case, Rucho versus Common Cause, that it will not entertain any partisan gerrymandering claims, racial gerrymandering is still unlawful and it's still justiciable by the court, meaning that those claims are still viable before the court. And I can't imagine how this map in North Carolina can achieve its partisan goals lawfully in the way that they're trying to do it now without violating the rights of Black voters. And that's why we really need Section 2, because Section 2 protects voters from being exploited by politicians or people who simply want to perpetuate discrimination.
And is that what you would say to people who say, look, the Voting Rights Act has outlived its purpose, the conditions that existed in 1965 no longer exist today?
Absolutely. Well, one of the things that's important to know is that Section 2 is not anchored in any particular facts from 1965. It is based on current conditions. So the exact type of discrimination that we're seeing in places like North Carolina, as we saw in Louisiana, as we saw improved in winning a case in just 2 years ago in Alabama in a case called Allen versus Milligan, this type of discrimination is sadly still current, still rampant, and still contaminating our democracy and our electoral processes. And it's not just an issue for the voters who are impacted. It's an issue for all Americans, because any elected official who is voted on a discriminatory map and ultimately winds up legislating is legislating from a discriminatory foundation. And ultimately that harms the legitimacy of our governing bodies. So it's something that all Americans should care deeply about.
So you heard them. These are people that are, I call them brainwashed. They're just going with anything and really believing that blacks won't be able to vote if Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act is gutted, which it should be. And I pray to God it does get gutted. Okay? So there are some people out there that a little smarter than your average bear. Check this out.
Oh my gosh, I just found out that Republicans are taking away our rights to vote. Democrats was right. I don't know what I was thinking about supporting Trump. Was I convincing? So turns out Republicans are trying to basically gut the Voting Act of 1965. And when I tell you Democrats are having a field day, oh, they're losing their minds over this one. So just a little bit of history for you guys that don't know what the Voting Rights of 1965 was. Take a look at this.
The Voting Rights Act of 1965 was one of the most powerful civil rights laws ever passed in the United States. It gave black people and all people the right to vote. It actually protected them because they were unfairly blocked for decades from voting. Before the law, many black people were threatened, beaten, and denied the right to vote. They had no rights. They had no vote.
Now, this act made perfect sense during a time when black people were actually being oppressed. We were being denied access to the same things as other people around us, okay? But not so much in 2025. But hear me out. This same act that was supposed to be used in favor of blacks is actually being used against us, at least the ones on the Democratic side. And I'm going to tell you why. All of y'all think that the Democrats are for black people because so many black people vote for them, but you guys are so tricked and it's crazy.
That's right. And in the state of Louisiana, that analysis was conducted in the Nairn case, and it was clear that regardless of party, white Democrats were not voting for black candidates, whether they were Democrats or not. And we know that there is such a significant chasm between how black and white voters vote in Louisiana that there's no question that even if there is some correlation between race and party, that race is the driving factor.
I promise you that Democrats are the biggest gaslighters of all time. The black representation that blacks actually have in America doesn't even come from black Americans. It's really immigrants. So yes, they may have dark skin and they may look like us, but they are not us. So immigrants are obviously going to fight for other immigrants, and that's why they're going so hard. Okay, so this video is getting too long, but there will be a part 2 where I break down how Democrats actually used the Voting Act to trick black people into voting for them while hindering them at the same time. Because you guys are lost. But you guys stay beautiful, stay blessed, and stay prosperous. Your girl is out.
This is an emergency. Donald Trump and the Supreme Court are actively trying to take away black people's right to vote. At least according to these people.
A Supreme Court case that could severely weaken the 1965 Voting Rights Act designed to protect minority voters.
They want to liquidate blacks. They want to
liquidate the blacks. Hey,
power in these districts.
I didn't know time machines existed, but apparently they do.
Well, if time machines did exist, I would go back in time and tell your father to wear a condom.
This morning, the United States Supreme Court is about to hear oral argument in a case
Here we go with this guy.
Future of whether or not there are race-based districts.
The Supreme Court is trying to hide its plan to prevent
This
black
bitch looks angry and surprised at the same time.
This is bad, like very, very bad.
No, your plastic surgery is very, very bad.
People talking about this, so please stay with me here because the Supreme Court.
The hands again. Haven't we talked about the hands before? As soon as you start talking like this, I tune out. I can't fucking listen to you.
What they're doing is setting a dangerous precedent that will put us back 50 fucking years.
The word is precedent, not president.
I really hate admitting this, but I am scared, like scared as shit. Like full of fear type shit, right? Like I don't know what it's like to fight for...
I love how he had to clarify what scared means. It's full of fear type shit. I don't know if you knew this, but if you look up scared in the dictionary, it is full of fear type shit. That is the working definition. Good old both of these. What would we do without you and your wise nuggets of wisdom? But all jokes aside, this whole gutting the Voter Rights Act and framing it as some sort of civil rights emergency is nothing more than strategic and manipulative incitement. This case doesn't aim to wipe out the entire VRA, which is a broad law covering numerous things like voter access, intimidation, etc. It specifically challenges how Section 2 is applied to redistricting, which is about ensuring that minority voters are not unfairly diluted through map drawing. And Section 2 is the main enforcement tool for fighting racial vote dilution in redistricting. Now, if the court's conservative majority rules that race can't be a primary factor in drawing districts, it could effectively neuter its use in redistricting cases. But the court has already weakened the VRA before. Shelby County v. Holder in 2013 killing Section 5's preclearance, and Brnovich v. DNC from 2021. So this is nothing groundbreaking, this is nothing innovative, it's nothing new. This has been done before. The Voting Rights Act is civil rights legislation tied to real, overt racism, like poll taxes or literacy tests. We have to stop framing every little challenge of outdated nuance within it as a rollback of progress. It isn't. This case is not about repealing the VRA, or even Section 2 entirely. It's about whether race-based remedies like drawing majority black districts violate the Equal Protection Clause, and other VRA provisions like voter intimidation are not at stake here, and even a bad ruling wouldn't even touch those. And the plaintiffs argue that Section 2's current use forces unconstitutional racial gerrymandering. They simply lean on the idea of a colorblind constitution, and whether you agree with that or not, those are the facts. A ruling in their favor might bar race as a dominant factor in redistricting, but it still wouldn't erase Section 2's broader prohibition against discriminatory voting practices. Think of it as trimming, it's not a full cut. But just to highlight further that this is not some secret racial agenda from evil racist conservatives trying to suppress black votes, if you look at 2023's Allen v. Milligan, the Supreme Court upheld Section 2's use for Alabama's maps, requiring a second black majority district. But hey, why let truth and logic get in the way of easily digestible narrative?
Okay, so you heard that. And so now I want to play a video from a lady who's going to break it down a little bit more, but you can tell she's very heavily left. But let me break it down for you. So I feel like it all stemmed from in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, when it was a predominantly black district. And the white people that lived in that district created their own city to get away because they wanted a new school district. And they wanted to get away from the crime because, unfortunately, the crime was pretty bad. And they were tearing the city up. You had a black mayor, black police chief, everything. And it was just, that city was going to excuse my language, going to shit. So these people, and it wasn't just all whites, it was some blacks and so forth, who was probably upper middle class or so forth. They moved and went to this new city, which caused, and they call it white flight. I don't know, but they call it segregation, even though blacks are always talking about having their own. So I believe this is where this whole thing stemmed from. So now let's get to what's with the Supreme Court case that's going on. It's a guy named Edward Callis, and he's a white individual, and he's suing to block Louisiana from redrawing the congressional map, and he's arguing that the state is relying heavily on race when creating a new district. And so you have to ask yourself, why does this matter? And it's because the Supreme Court is weighing whether race-conscious redistricting, even when done to remedy past discrimination, violates the Constitution's Equal Protection Clause. So this would then mean that Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which allows race to be considered in districting to prevent discrimination, could be severely weakened or probably, eliminated altogether. Who knows? But this could reshape how now maps are being drawn out. And this is why I'm saying that Democrats are fighting for this, because we're still using the past. And if you saw some of the videos, we're still using the past to say things like, white people don't vote for blacks, and which is a lie because they voted heavily for a black president twice now, reelected Obama twice, and we have to get out of this mindset that slavery, Jim Crow, and all this other stuff is why we still need the Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act up till now in 2025, as if a white person could not represent a black person or a black person could not represent a white person. We're now saying that only black people can represent blacks. This is just incredible, because we're moving so far backwards with this belief that we cannot hold people to represent us, no matter what skin color they are. It's amazing. And I want you to listen to this lady and you'll see what I'm talking about.
In your breakdown, a legal case centered around Louisiana could reshape the way minority populations and their vote are protected across the country. You know this as the redistricting fight. The Supreme Court will hear it as Louisiana v. Calais next week. Here's the foundation. Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act of 1965 is designed to protect minority voters from having their political power diluted. It bans any voting map or practice that weakens their ability to elect candidates of their choice, even if it wasn't done or drawn with racist intent. A group of black voters alleged a violation of this act in 2022 because just one of Louisiana's 6 congressional districts was majority black, despite black residents being about 1/3 of the state's population during the 2020 census. So after years of litigation, the maps were redrawn to reflect the population and include 2 majority black districts. And in response, the legal pendulum swung. A group of white voters has alleged in Louisiana v. Calais that the new maps were drawn solely on race. And even when it's done to protect voting rights, they say race-based map making is unconstitutional. Here's what's potentially at stake. The Supreme Court could potentially decide to overturn Louisiana's new congressional maps and could possibly rule Section 2 as a whole unconstitutional or limit the way it is applied in the redistricting process across the country. There is a lot of legal precedent and room for middle ground, but this case could fundamentally change the way minority populations are considered when drawing district lines. Louisiana Attorney General Liz Murrill has argued she sees any consideration of race in election maps as unconstitutional. And a judge ruled Monday Murrill can't be forced to defend the congressional maps passed as law by Louisiana lawmakers. The case is set to be re-argued October 15th in Washington.
Okay, so before I end this show, let me go into some stats so you'll know exactly what's going on. Okay, so the numbers tell a story, all right? So from 1965, in Mississippi, only 6.7% of eligible black voters were registered. Across the South, black registration averaged below 30%, and there were virtually no black elected officials in the region. Okay, let's move forward between the years of 1980 and the year 2000. We'll call this the rise. By 1980, black voter registration in many southern states exceeded 50%. The number of black elected officials surged past 10,000 nationwide, and majority minority districts were created to ensure representation. That means that the minority were able to be infiltrated to the majority section, whereby it was more that the minority can have their voices heard as that's what was claimed, even though it went into another whole district, which could have been conservative and their values could have been different from that value, but they merged into the majority. Okay, so let's look at 2008 to 2020. Let's call this the shift. In 2008, black voter turnout hit 66.6%, surpassing white turnout nationally. In Georgia's 2020 election, black turnout nearly matched white turnout. And the Voters Registration Act Section 5 pre-clearance was struck down in Shelby County versus Holder. This was 2013. yet minority turnout remains strong in many areas. Okay, very interesting. And now, 2025, let's call this let's call this the weaponization, which is what I said earlier. So in Louisiana versus Callis, the Supreme Court is reviewing whether creating a second majority black district violates the Constitution. And critics argue the Voter Registration Act is now used to pack black voters into districts, flipping seats in conservative areas and entrenching partisan control. So that's what the whole game is. And I hope people understand that this is all a game. Democrats, Republicans, conservatives notice that Democrats are using Section 2 to bring in more blacks into those conservative districts. So you have blacks that all live here, you have conservatives live here, but then Democrats are saying, well, they need to have more representation, so they bring them over into that district, which causes a redistricting in those areas. And this is what the Supreme Court is looking at, and I do support it, Section 2 being struck down. So let's see what happens. They already talked, October 15th was a hearing, and now we'll wait and see what the decision will be. All right, so until then, let's sit back and wait. Guys, thank you for coming along. Remember, please like, subscribe, and share this channel. My name is Mark. I was really happy to do this video, and I hope to see you guys again. I'm going to start doing some premieres so that I can start seeing more people, leave comments, live chat. We'll all be watching it together, okay? Once again, guys, take it easy, and I will see you soon. Until then, peace.